Welcome to the Daily Decameron, Tales to Connect Us in Troubled Times. Episode 2, Federigo and the Falcon. Today, a story of undying love and the great sacrifice it inspires. The tale of the Florentine nobleman Federigo degli Alberici and his two great loves, his noble lady and his prized falcon, might well have inspired another famous short story, written 6 centuries later, O. Henry's The Gift of the Magi, a tale that, like this one, hinges on an ironic twist involving sacrifices made with the best of intentions and yet entirely at cross purposes. In the end, the lesson of both stories is much the same. It's not what we have, what we keep, or what we give away that matters most. It's the power of sacrifice to reveal the nobility of the heart and the depths of true and lasting love. Quinta giornata, novella nona, Federigo degli Alberici. The 5th day, the 9th novella, the tale of Federigo degli Alberici. There once lived in Florence a young nobleman, Federigo degli Alberici, who was renowned in all of Tuscany for his skill with arms and his courtly ways. Federigo fell in love with a noblewoman, Monna Giovanna, who was thought to be one of the city's loveliest and most charming ladies. To win her favor, he competed in jousting tournaments and spent endless amounts of money hosting lavish parties in her honor. But she, as virtuous as she was beautiful, cared not for these things, or for the man who proffered them. Spending beyond his means in this way, Federigo squandered his wealth and was left a pauper, with nothing to his name but a modest farm in Campi, from which he earned a meager living, and a falcon, which was thought to be one of the finest in all the world. More in love than ever, and unable to sustain his life in town, he moved to the farm and spent his days falconing and patiently enduring his poverty. Meanwhile, Monna Giovanna married, and at length her husband fell ill. Seeing the end approaching, he made out his will, leaving his fortune to his young son, with the stipulation that if the son died without any heirs, the inheritance would pass to Monna Giovanna. After Giovanna's husband died, she would spend summers with her son at an estate not far from Federigo's farm, and so it happened that the boy became friendly with Federigo, and loved spending time with him and learning all about birds and dogs. Watching Federigo's falcon in flight made him so happy that he longed to own it, though of course he would never dare ask for it because he could see how much Federigo treasured it. And then the boy, like his father before him, fell ill. Monna Giovanna was devastated. The boy was her only child, and she loved him very much. She stayed constantly by his side, comforting him and begging him to tell her if there was anything he desired. Having heard her pleas again and again, the boy finally said, "Mother, if you could get me Federigo's falcon, I know it would make me so happy that I would soon get well again." Now, Monna Giovanna knew that Federigo had long been in love with her, though she had never given him so much as a second look. And she thought, how can I ask him for this falcon, which I hear is quite the finest that ever flew, and which, besides, is his only means of support and his only remaining pleasure? But after much deliberation, her love for her son prevailed, and she said to him, "Cheer up, my son, and think only of getting well, for I promise you that tomorrow I will bring you that falcon." And the boy was so delighted, he seemed to start recovering that very day. The next morning, Giovanna went to Federigo's modest house and asked to see him. Since the weather had not been right for falconing for some days, Federigo was out working in the garden. When he heard that Monna Giovanna was asking for him, he was so happy he ran to the house to greet her. "Good day, Federigo," she said, radiating all her charm and grace. "I have come to make amends for all the harm that has come to you from loving me too much. And As a token of my remorse, I would be honored to dine with you today." "Dear lady," Federigo replied, "I have never suffered any harm because of you, but rather so much good that if I have ever been worth anything, it is because of your goodness and because of the love that I have felt for you. Your visit today is so dear to me that I would spend again all that I have spent before, but, as you see, you have come to call on a poor host." And with that, he humbly invited her into the garden to wait while he prepared the meal and set the table. But back in the house, he soon realized he had nothing suitable to serve the lady for whom he had squandered all his wealth. Beside himself, he scurried from room to room, finding neither money nor anything he might pawn, until his gaze fell upon his beloved falcon, sitting on its perch. In desperation, he seized the bird, wrung its neck, and called for his servant girl to pluck it, set it on a spit, and roast it to perfection. At length, he laid the table with the one good set of spotless linens he still possessed, returned to the garden, and announced that lunch was ready. And so they feasted on the falcon, Monna Giovanna never suspecting what it was she was eating. After the meal and some pleasant conversation, the lady decided it was time to reveal the purpose of her visit. "Federigo," she began, "as you look back on your past and on my own virtue, which you perhaps may have mistaken for harshness and cruelty, you might well be surprised by my presumption when you hear what I've come to ask you today. But if you had children of your own, and could know the love a parent feels for a child, I believe you would surely forgive me. My son is ill, and it is motherly love that compels me, quite against my will, to ask of you a gift which I know you hold most dear, for it is the only pleasure left to you. This gift is your falcon, which my son is so taken with that I fear that if I do not bring it to him, his illness will become worse and he will die. And so I must appeal not to the love you have for me, but to your own noble nature, to give me the bird, so that I might do what I can to save my son's life." Hearing these words, and knowing that he could not give the lady the one gift she had ever asked him for, Federigo was unable to speak, and began instead to weep. Giovanna, thinking he was overcome with grief at the thought of parting with his falcon, was just about to take back her request, but before she could, Federigo regained his composure and said, "My lady, ever since it pleased God that I fall in love with you, I have suffered much at the hands of fortune. But all of that is nothing compared to the hand she has dealt me just now. You have come to my humble home, as you never would when I was rich, and asked me for a small gift, which, alas, I cannot give you. For when I heard that you, in your kindness, wished to dine with me, I thought it only right to honor you with the most precious food I could offer. And it was the very falcon you asked me for that I chose to have roasted and served to you this day." And so saying, he laid the feathers, the feet, and the beak of the bird before her as proof of what he had done. The lady first thought to reproach Federigo for serving her so fine a thing as a falcon, but then she thought of his generosity, which poverty had never diminished, and realized how much she admired him. So instead, she thanked him and, her heart overflowing with sadness, returned home to her son, who, whether in disappointment about the falcon or because of his illness, passed from this life just a few days later. After a long period of mourning and grief, Monna Giovanna's brothers urged her to remarry, since she was still young and very wealthy. At first, she resisted, but then she thought of Federigo and the great sacrifice he had made for her, and she said to her brothers, "I would sooner remain a widow, but if marry I must, I will settle for no man other than Federigo degli Alberici." "Are you mad?" her brothers scoffed. He doesn't have a penny to his name." To this, Monna Giovanna replied, "My brothers, I would rather have a man who lacks money than money that lacks a man." The brothers, seeing how determined she was, and knowing that for all his poverty, Federigo was a good and noble man, gave her, with all her riches, in marriage to him. United at last with the woman he had loved so much for so long, Federigo lived happily and managed his finances a bit more prudently all the rest of his days. Thanks for listening to The Daily Decameron, a production of the Italian Cultural Institute of San Francisco. Anna Maria Di Giorgio, director. This program was produced by Franca Cavallaro and edited by Enrica Cavalli, with music performed by John Sayles. I'm your host and translator, Steve Siegelman. We hope you'll join us for more episodes in both English and Italian. Meanwhile, stay well, stay in touch, and share your favorite stories with the people you love.